lot of people wonder, what is the main difference between using topics and child agents in my agents? Or when should I use topics and when should I use child agents? Or also, what are the pros and cons of each of these things? I want to answer all of these questions by explaining the key differences between these two things that you need to be aware of in Copilot Studio, all in super simple terms, so that you can be more confident in the agents you are building. Hey, my name is Griffin Lickfeld. I am a Microsoft MVP with Copilot Studio, and I wanted to break down this topic with you today. So we are talking about Copilot Studio Agents today and how to build them effectively. This is all within the Microsoft Power Platform or the Microsoft ecosystem. This is also more of kind of like a talking head as opposed to a screen sharing tutorial. I'm wanting to outline what the main difference is between these two things or concepts that you should be aware of as you're architecting your agents, not just building them. And so here's how we want to do it. I want to define what topics are and what child agents are, then discuss how triggers, actions, conditional branching, and tools all apply to this conversation. Then I generally want to outline which one of these different things should be used and also provide some specific use cases for you to help make this concept super clear for you in your situation and your use case. So let's get into it. So topics, what are topics? Topics are structured conversation maps. And more specifically, they are how you defined, hey, first say this, then do this, then say call this tool, then respond and say this, and then ask this, etc. If you're familiar with the original Copilot Studio, before we had Copilot and ChatGPT and these large language models, if you're familiar with Power Virtual Agents, topics are the same kind of concept, right? This is where you're defining, hey, I want you to do this, and then every single time after you do that, do this. And then after every single time you do that, do this. If you were to build a chatbot with zero AI capabilities baked into it, you would essentially be building topics, right? The conversation flows. Now, I am not saying that topics are bad, but this is how you would build a non-AI driven chatbot if you wanted to just exclusively use topics, because you're defining it to do X and then Y and then Z. Now again, I don't want to get you fired up in the comments. Be sure to let me know maybe how you would disagree down there though. But again, these have a time and a place where you want your agent to follow a structured path. Now, I want to flip the script and talk about child agents. We'll close the loop on topics here in a second. Child agents are pretty different in that child agents don't have topics and they aren't being defined to follow specific conversation paths. They can have their own instructions, their own knowledge, and tools, just like regular parent agents, as I'll probably call them throughout this conversation, just like regular parent agents do. And so if you've worked with Power Automate flows, right? The automation tool inside the Power Platform, think of child agents as child flows. In Power Automate, you can have a parent flow and one of your actions be to call a child flow or a different flow. You can call child agents from a parent agent when you would like. Now, that's not necessarily as deterministic as Power Automate flow, but more on this in just a second. You're getting ahead of me. All right, you're getting ahead of me. No, seriously. Seriously though. So I want to talk about some major differences between these two to really kind of drive this point home. And the first thing is this idea of a trigger. Just like a Power Automate flow, triggers or topics, have triggers. And this effectively is what's telling your agent or your bot when to start this topic. So topics allow you to define different trigger types. You can have it be when a certain activity occurs. You can have it be exclusively when it's redirected to from another topic, or most commonly and by default is when the agent chooses. So this is kind of the default. When you create a new topic, you then add a description of what this topic does. The agent is using what you put in that description to say, hey, when should I use this topic, right? When somebody says a message about something or I'm directed to do X, Y, or Z, when should I use this topic? That's the idea of a trigger. And child agents only have the when an agent chooses sort of trigger. Now, child agents don't actually have triggers, but I'm just saying conceptually, that's what the child agent is. Technically, it doesn't have it doesn't have triggers like topics, but what you're saying is you want to tell your agent when it should call this child agent. But child agents are essentially extra tools that the parent agent can call on whenever it thinks it needs to. And it knows when to use a specific child agent based on the child agent's name and the description. Those are both very important in helping your parent agent understand when it needs to call that child agent. And so child agents don't have the ability to follow a strict path like topics do. The LLM does all of the heavy lifting for you. And if you're unfamiliar with this concept of a deterministic or an indeterministic process, I want to try to explain it for you very briefly in like 1 minute. So essentially, think of a Power Automate flow. Every single time, no matter what, it is going to follow the defined logic that you have. It's going to do this action, then maybe this conditional branching, then this action, then this action. It's very deterministic. What it's going to do is already determined. Topics are relatively deterministic pieces. Now, they're not as deterministic as flows because they can be directed away from, and you can have generative answer nodes and things inside of them. So they're not as deterministic. It still uses, say, the large language model to determine variables and the values of those variables. That's the branching. An indeterministic process would be a child agent, right? Because you're not defining the process much at all. You're giving it instructions and descriptions and tools with descriptions and adding and taking away permissions and different things that it can do. So it's not, wild, wild west free reign, but it's going to be less deterministic than a topic, which is less deterministic than a Power Automate flow. Does that kind of make sense? Hopefully I'm explaining that right. But it's important for us to think about this spectrum of tools available to us as we're building agents. And so when should you use these different things? When should you use topics? When should you use child agents? If you need your agent to be able to say X, then call a connection or a tool to Y, then respond and with a question Z, every single time you use a topic. If you want your agent to be less deterministic, but have specific instructions about the certain concept or topic of conversation, use a child agent. You might be wondering, like, why should I use child agents and not just stuff all of these things in the parent agent? Like, why have a child agent in general? If they're not deterministic, why not just keep it at that parent agent level? Well, some architecture principles are going to be the same as parent-child Power Automate flows. And so say you're going to have multiple different agents in the future that need to use a specific tool in a specific way, you should create a child agent that does that. Let me give you an example. Microsoft is coming out with the new MCP Microsoft Learn server. And so say you may have several use cases where you want to connect using this tool. So instead of adding that tool to all of your agents and managing all of the permissions individually on each one of those, you might want to create an MCP Microsoft Learn agent. And so then that way the permissions and the things that are allowed are on that child agent, and then all of those parent agents just call the child. And so say you needed to add a permission or take away a permission from the MCP tool, you don't have to go and update all the different parents. You just need to update the child, because that's what they're all calling and referring to. Then, if all of your agents need to use the same tool, it has boosted performance. That's what I'm trying to say. It can improve the performance, it can use less tokens, which ultimately improves the cost. And so agents are best when they are thin. And what I mean by that is when they do one simple job very well. I shouldn't even say simple job, but one thing very well. We don't necessarily want a parent agent that has this tool that connects to our CRM, and this tool that connects to Microsoft Learn, and this tool that connects to our ERP, and this tool that connects to our Monday.com, and this tool that connects to our Slack, and this tool that connects to Canva, all of these different things. We don't want that. All it's going to do is going to help it get confused and use a lot of tokens because it's going to be processing it. Instead, we should be trying to think about keeping our child agents and our agent thin, and so then that way our parent agents could be dumb, I guess, and call our child agents whenever they need. But all of the real nuance and trickiness might be at the child agent level for that one specific use case. Speaking of use cases, as we wrap up this conversation, I want to apply this to some specific use cases. And so you want to use topics when you need controlled conversation logic or multi-turn dialogue or predictable outcomes that require branching, what might be called slot filling or deterministic workflows. And so I have two kind of prepared. Think of like an IT help desk triage. You need a structured dialogue to gather requirements details like the device type, the urgency, an error number. The agent in your scenario may want to follow a consistent intake flow before routing that bug to the appropriate person. Topics could allow you to have that branching logic, that validation and integration with the ticketing systems. Another one could be like a HR leave request or a benefits Q&A. And policies have specific rules and decision trees, and topics can allow these forms or the conditions and the approval approval workflows to live inside of your agent. And so then that way you can kind of extract answers and not just generative interpretation. That might be a scenario for you. When I think you want to avoid topics is when you want the agent to rely on open-ended generative answers or retrieval from data or broad conversational, more flexibility. So think about it if you're wanting to build kind of a natural Q&A agent over maybe enterprise knowledge or maybe over Microsoft Learn like we shared, the user can ask thousands of possible questions, right? And that agent could need to be responsible for thousands of different possible options and branches and all these different things. We do not want to build topics for all of those things. We want to leverage what's called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially searching through your data sources. It's a much more effective way of retrieving this information as opposed to, say, like building out a bunch of topics. All the possible topics you would need to take care of would be impossible to account for and especially manage going forward as things change. Kind of in a similar vein, I guess, so to speak, is if you're building some kind of creative or open-ended work like drafting emails or brainstorming ideas, right? Creativity is like the most indeterministic thing that probably us humans do. And so topics in these scenarios, I think, would add almost no value. And so generative AI should construct the output freely in these scenarios. And I think, let me just tell you, like, you can get a long way just leveraging the models. I mean, even today, as of recording this, the models are getting very, very good. And I'm sure that the performance of these models, as in the accuracy of its output, is only going to increase over time at an accelerating rate. So I would challenge you, if you're trying to build an agent and you feel like it's maybe not working quite right or seems to repeat itself or do this or do that, I would maybe see if you can leverage less topics, maybe more child agents in your scenario. If you feel like you have extra questions, you can drop them in the comments, or you can book a call directly with me using the first link in the description down below. This is going to get you a call directly one-on-one with me on my personal calendar so we can help you with anything that you have. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of the video. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer channel. If you are still confused on when you should use topics, you should check out this video here. Thanks so much. We'll connect with you in the next one.